When it comes to whole life insurance, people usually have buyer's remorse when the cash value underdelivers. Agents will often say, when you get a policy, the illustration is meaningless. Don't look at the cash value. It's more important about how you use the cash value. Personally, I think that's nonsense because people get a whole life insurance policy based on what they see, specifically the illustration and the cash value growth. And when they have a poor experience or decide to cancel it is when it underdelivers. I thought I was going to have $1 million and I only have $600,000. Why did it underdeliver? So with that said, how do we prevent that from occurring? Or where can I see proof that whole life insurance actually works? We're going to look at some proof today. What we have is a policy that was started back in 2017. We're going to look at a policy. It's on a 45-year-old individual. His original plan was to fund $130,000 per year for 5 years. That's a total of $650,000. He went with one of the 4 major mutual companies, massive MassMutual. And one of the things that he's done, he's added more money, but when he first started, a lot of people approach whole life insurance like this. If the policy performs like what the illustration shows, I'll keep adding money. However, I'm going to track the performance. If it doesn't perform, I'm not going to keep adding money and I might even cancel it. This is usually what happens. So the first thing we want to look at here is the original illustration back from 2017. So when he started his policy in 2017, the dividend interest rate with MassMutual was 6.70%. So when he looked at the illustration back then, the illustration assumed that the dividend rate would be 6.7% year in and year out. Here's the original illustration. You can see MassMutual's logo has changed. It doesn't look like that anymore. So as we look at this guy, what do we see? Well, we see the funding is $130,000 per year for 5 years with nothing thereafter. He didn't want to pay a penny after the 5th year based on that original plan. The design of this policy is very important. I'm going to touch on this at the end, but just very quickly, of that $130,000, it's not just a life insurance premium. The premium is up here. It's 10% of the total payment, and then we're plowing the rest into PUAs, which maximizes the cash value. We do have a term insurance rider attached. That cost is minimal though. There's the first year cash value at $112,000. 130,000 times 5 is what? 650 grand. By the 5th year, the illustrated cash value was $668,000. Now keep in mind, this illustration is from 2017. The dividend rate was 6.70%. Down at the bottom, there we go. He received an ultra preferred rating, and there's the date of the illustration. Presented by Steve L. Parisi. I hate when I've got my name shortened and then the middle initial. It drives me nuts. I know I'm weird. I must be weird because I like life insurance so much. All right, so what we're gonna look at is the actual performance. So with his actual policy, as the years have passed, MassMutual's dividend rate has changed. All life insurance companies' dividend rates have changed. When he started, he was at 6.70%. What's happened since then? Well, 2018, 6.4, 19, 6.4, 2020, 6.2. Look at 2021 through 2023. It was 6%. So we see a dividend decline as much as 70 basis points. That is going to impact the actual results. How much though? We'll look at that, and we're also going to factor in the next 2 years. 2024, dividends started to come back up to 6.1%. 2025, 6.4%. So getting stronger now, getting closer to where it originally was. So whenever we look at the actual results of a policy, how we do it is by looking at the annual statements. Personally, what I like to do is look at an updated illustration every year, see what that illustration projects as far as the year-end cash value, and then make sure the annual statement actually hits those values. I've seen illustrations accurate on a yearly basis. Whenever the dividend rate changes, that's typically where the illustrated values are going to be different. So let's take a look here. His first year cash value on the illustration was projected to be $112,000 and change. Here is his first annual statement. Ending net cash value, $111,842. That's a little bit less than what was illustrated. Not much. Most people say, who cares? He's a very technical guy and asked why. The reason why is because his policy date was in July, but he did what's called backdating the policy. So even though the policy date was in July, he started the policy, he made his first payment a few months after July. So what that means is the large PUA deposit, which was money that went into cash value, that begins to receive interest based on the month it is deposited that is not backdated to July. So that's why he's a few $100s less than what was illustrated in the first year. But that was the actual first year cash value. Then we've got year two. I like how Mass breaks down their statements where we see the end of the first year, there it was, end of the second year, there it is, $229 and change. Nice. And we can look at each year as we've been tracking this. We see that the values are coming up. Here we go. Here's 2023, 701 and change. And then if we look at 2024, just about 750. So you'll see the values we just looked at line up with what we're about to look at, which will be a performance review. We're going to look at this on Excel, so you can just see it year by year. Before we do that, however, here's what I want to hit on. He is a very, very technical guy. He asks a lot of very good questions because he wants to understand what is going on with his money. I get it. The questions he asks, most people should ask. So what he wanted to see was the original illustration. The last thing I want to say is, oh yeah, you have a copy from when I sent it to you 9 years ago. No, my job is to provide that for him. So we've got the original illustration and we want to see the actual results. But when measuring the performance, what he wants to see, he wanted to see the dividend rate, but it's somewhat useless because it's a gross rate of return. He's never going to see his money grow by that. So we wanted to see the annual yield, which is the yearly rate of return, the internal rate of return, which is a nice way to calculate the average return on a life insurance policy. And then he wanted to see the same thing, but in dollars. Cash value growth is just showing how much he gets from the life insurance company every year. So if you have a whole life insurance policy and you asked, hey, how much money did I earn last year? If the total growth was $5,000, not including your payment, then I would say you earned $5,000 last year. And the total gain is easy. We just look at our total payments, then our total cash value, and the difference is the gain. And why he wants to know all of this is because he plans on taking loans for real estate and he wants to make sure that the growth on the policy exceeds the cost to borrow, which is a good video for another time. Let's take a look at the actual results. So what we're going to look at is the original illustration and then the annual statements we just looked at, and then what things look like moving forward. Sound good? All right, let's have some fun. So this is what we just looked at. This is the original illustration. You see by the fifth year, it's that same 668. Okay. Now, the extra reports. The dividend rate was 6.70% when he started the policy, meaning this illustration assumes a dividend rate of 6.7% is applied to the policy forever. That didn't happen. But what we also want to look at here is that original dividend rate resulted in an annual yield of what we see here. So the illustration was projecting returns as high as about 5.5% on a yearly basis. That's after he's gotten into it for a while. And a whole life insurance policy, safe, liquid, tax-free place to put money. That's why he was attracted to this. Then we've got the internal rate of return. which again is a fancy way of looking at the average. There we go. First year, the annual yield and IRR are going to be the same. But we see what that looks like over time. And then we want to compare this to what has actually happened. All right. So let's look at this year by year. Year one, what did that annual statement show? 111, 842 versus the projection 112, 172. So a few $100s off, not much of a difference. How about the next year? We see 130 goes in. He has what? 229 and change in cash value. Okay. What was the original projection? 230 and change in cash value. What we can look at here is the annual yield on the original and compare it with the actual results. Why is it a little bit less attractive? Because the dividend rate came down, which will impact your net returns. Okay? How about the next year? What do we see? Well, now he's at 365 compared to the original 367 and change. The dividend still 6.4%. Next year, however, comes down to 6.2%. As a result, we see the results starting to lag a little bit compared to the original. Let's look at the next year. So now he has funded as much as originally planned. He's paid in $650,000. What does he have in cash value? Just about 657. What did the original show? 668 and change. So he's behind about $11,000 when we look at the difference here, which is not massive relative to the dollar amount he's paid in, but it is noticeable. I noticed it. Most people are going to notice it. Why? That's the first question. Here's the direct answer. Your dividend rate has come down since you started the policy, which interest rates were low during this period of time. That's why dividends were low. Now, with that said, what does it look like as time passes? We're going to look at that, but here's the thing. He was happy with the performance, so he decided to keep on paying something. It wasn't $130,000 per year. It was just the minimum premium. So he's been paying that minimum premium of $13,000 and a change per year. He could pay more. We considered it, but he decided not to. So here's what he has actually paid so far. Through policy year 9, he's paid a total of $702. That is his total out of pocket. His total cash value is $858. When we compare that with the original, we're at $821. However, what's the difference? Total funding. He's added more money with the actual policy. So comparing the cash values at this point really isn't a fair comparison. It's going to make the actual results look better. But what we can look at are the net yields. So now the dividends come up a little bit. For 2025, with that higher dividend of 6.4, the yield this year, 5.20%. Last year, he earned 5.22%. That's the actual net growth rate when we examine the policy and what it did last year. So 5.2% this upcoming year. What did the original illustration show in year 9? 5.25%. So now it's starting to move at the pace that he wanted to see originally, which is fantastic. Moving forward, he might make one more payment here of $13,000 and change. And after that, when he hits 55, he's probably going to stop. Just from the conversations we've had over the years, he's like, after the 10th year, I think I'm good. My plan now, Steve, is really to be able to use this for real estate. And if it continues to perform at this, like that's fantastic. I wanted more than a 5% net yield year over year. I know the dividend rate was higher when I started, but this is still fantastic, especially when he considers the tax benefits. So with a life insurance policy, safe place to put money. You can access it anytime you want without penalties. and it's tax-free if we do everything right. He's in a very high tax bracket, which makes that 5% extremely valuable. And he doesn't have to worry about what the stock market does because I'm not invested in the market at all here. It's considered a fixed asset. So the returns were very helpful. A lot of people like to see this. To wrap this up, do you remember what else he asked for? The growth in dollars. So when we take a look at that, the next tab is the exact same thing, but just what the policy is doing when we look at the growth in dollars instead of percentages. So we've got the actual performance, there's your dividend rate, but then here's the yearly growth. If he said, what did I get from the insurance company last year? This dollar amount would be the answer. It is not the annual dividend on your statement. That does not represent the total earnings that you received. And then the total growth or the total gain is pretty simple. If you look at 2025, he's paid in $702,000 and change. $858 is the cash value, which means the gain is $156. These are the actual results too, which is nice. So this is an actual whole life insurance policy that is 9 years old, and it's performed very close to the original illustration. Why it did not perform exact was primarily due to when he started in 2017 with a very high dividend interest rate that's gradually come down. So when it comes to whole life insurance policies, we've seen it not work well when the policy is not set up well, specifically when the base premium is very high and it takes me 7, 10, or even 15 years to get my money back. That's when it does not work and where we see the actual results under-deliver compared to what was illustrated. Where we see it work very well is when two things are followed. One is the company selection. I'll always recommend looking at one of the 4 major mutuals because I've seen proof of performance with them. MassMutual, Guardian, New York Life, and Northwestern Mutual. And number 2 has to do with the policy design. If it's set up similar to his policy, where he paid in $130,000 per year, but $13,000 was the actual premium, that's where we see the performance maxed out from start to finish. Even if the dividend goes down, I'm still minimizing the expenses, I'm minimizing the agent compensation, which results in more cash value, and we see more cash value when we look at the actual results. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear any thoughts, questions, comments. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please let us know in the comments below. And as always, I hope this helps. Thanks so much.